What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So we've covered Nintendo's battle with emulation quite extensively here over the years, especially when it comes down to, I don't know, these little emulator handhelds that are playing Mario or Zelda games. And turns out now, based on a recent discovery, that Nintendo finds emulators quite useful even when it's not on their own platform. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about the new Xbox Series X console, the all-digital one that's launched, as it looks like Microsoft's made some pretty interesting changes inside of it. And then Mario Party Jamboree is out this week. Reviews went live, and, well, we'll take a look at how it stacks up versus all the other Mario Parties. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members to the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're going to start today with Hogwarts Legacy, specifically a new release for the game reportedly coming next year. Now, this was reported over on Insider Gaming. We can see this posted up. Well, they say Insider Gaming understands that a Hogwarts Legacy Definitive Edition is in development. Its content will be sold as a separate DLC for those with the existing game. Apparently, this Definitive Edition is said to have around 10 to 15 hours of additional content with a new story quest, side quests, activities, and outfits. Now, we're still trying to figure out how much the expansion would be, somewhere between $20 and $30, but it's not shocking to think that they would do a definitive edition, so I'm expecting a brand new boxed copy for store shelves, and then if you already have it, and it's like loaded on your system digitally or with a disc, there will be an option to buy the additional content separately, kind of like an upgrade path in that case. And again, it makes sense. Hogwarts Legacy sold a ton, like over 20 million copies. So naturally, they're going to go back to the well and see if they can just sell more DLC, especially since there's plans to have a follow-up or a sequel to Hogwarts Legacy in the future, which we're still trying to figure out how they're going to approach that. We'll have multiplayer stuff to it. We'll still just be single player. Hard to say there, but not surprising to hear about this. And yeah, I would expect something like this to pop up in 2025. So keep an eye out if you're a fan of Hogwarts Legacy. Seems like more content's coming your way. Also, we did have a new announcement from Sony yesterday, and no, it's not a new game. Although we do have at least some stuff coming up, like Ghost of Yote, right? But people are still asking for Naughty Dog and Sony Santa Monica and others. But take a look at this over on PlayStation Blog, where they say, PlayStation the concert transports fans in the epic worlds of God of War, The Last of Us, Ghost of Tsushima, and Horizon franchises, amongst many others that reflect our 30 years of making games that have not only captivated players, but are celebrated for their breathtaking and immersive soundtracks too. With innovative technology and world-class production, fans will experience a stunning fusion of multi-layered visuals, immersive surround sound, and an all-star ensemble blending the classical and modern instruments. Now, they do have like an entire tour schedule here that's listed over on PlayStation Blog, and they also do note that tickets will be going on sale starting today, October 16th, so they expect it to sell out quickly. So if you're someone who likes to go to these different concerts, you may want to look into that sooner rather than later. I'm not a big concert goer for the different video games or anything. I know that is a popular thing. I've seen it online, people posting images and stuff being there, but it seems like something that's really fun for fans of the different franchises who are like really into the soundtracks and stuff. So in that case, if you're one of those people, seems like Sony is going to be touring with all kinds of music from their different franchises. Again, check in on that here probably today, especially since they're expecting these tickets to sell out pretty quick. Oh, and we did have those PlayStation Plus premium games go live, which was like Siren and Dino Crisis, which Dino Crisis has been hyped up for a while since it seemed to leak out through a banner ad on PlayStation Plus. Well, now that it's out there and people can download it, they realized, oh yeah, it's a Capcom release, which means, as you can see this over on PlayStation Lifestyle, yeah, the PS1 Classic is locked behind PS Plus Premium and it doesn't have trophies. So you can't buy it a la carte, and then you also don't get any trophies to add to your profile, that is a disappointing aspect. Look, I know the game functions fine without trophies, but it is still fun to see the different things they line up for trophies with these classic games, because you can kind of revisit them all over again and see how your typical run would do with trophies, and maybe you discover new things just based on the description they have to earn, like, say, the Platinum Trophy. So this still feels like bare minimum effort from Capcom. I would like to see them get trophies in here and a la carte purchase, especially for Dino Crisis, since it was one of the more hyped up up and really, I would say, exciting releases we've seen for PlayStation Plus Premium, but as of now, it's like a bare minimum effort here from Capcom, which is especially frustrating since people have been hoping to see Dino Crisis make a return, but it's harder to get people excited for releases like these when it feels like Sony and Capcom aren't themselves excited for it. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and their battle with emulation, which has been well documented, and recently it's felt like Nintendo has become more and more aggressive, specifically around the Switch emulation scene. And look, that one does make a bit more sense considering the Switch is still just current, like it's Nintendo's main platform right now. Like they don't have a handheld and a home console split up, nothing. It's the Switch for them. So in their mind, they need to protect the platform at all costs for them, as well as third-party partners who I'm sure aren't excited to see their games being downloaded online and then just played on these hacked Switch systems that, well, unfortunately for Nintendo, they kind of left the back door open with Nvidia for like 25 million Switches to be, well, opened up with a paperclip. Nonetheless, emulation being something that has obviously enabled people without a Switch to play these games on their PC, so Nintendo naturally figured out ways to get rid of Yuzu and Ryojinx. I mean, they're still out there, but they're not necessarily in like full development any longer, and even some of the forks have continued to fall over and over and over again. So when you see Nintendo with that context, and then you see Nintendo also go after YouTube videos that show, say, Mario or Zelda being played on one of these retro handheld systems that are running like Android, and oh, okay, it's just being emulated with some of these open source emulators that Nintendo hasn't been able to take down. Well, it feels like Nintendo wants no emulators anywhere, especially not on like PC or retro handhelds, anything. So when you see this pop up, this was posted over on PC Gamer, but I did see this message over on X posted originally, and I thought it was funny as well, which this over on X, this is from Chris Mac 32. He actually tagged Bob in it, but the big thing here is, of course, if you go to the museum, you can play retro games just right there, these like kiosks and stuff, which it's a fun idea to go through the history of Nintendo and then have it just being interactive there in front of you. It's not necessarily just a museum that you don't get to like interact with. That makes sense for Nintendo. It kind of makes them Nintendo, right? To have an interactive museum. So how do you solve the issue of hooking up older systems, maybe to newer displays? You don't do that. You use a PC. And, well, Chris Mac 32 figured it out by unplugging one of the controllers. Take a listen. So yeah, it appears Nintendo is using a Windows PC of some kind on the other end of that USB cable that is plugged into the Super Nintendo or the Super Famicom Classic controller through USB-C. One, it's very odd to me that that's not just completely locked in, as in like you can't, like, first, it's weird to me you can just unplug the USB cable. Typically you'll have some kind of locking mechanism so it will not come off there, because you feel like someone could just take it and just walk off with it. So that part, kind of strange. But I did see people laughing about this, and like, this is embarrassing for Nintendo. Well, technically, the thing that Nintendo gets annoyed about, because they can't really go after, say, an open source emulator for the Super Nintendo, they're just there, they're freely distributed, not much that can be done there. When it comes to the Switch, they've figured out ways to kind of take them down based on even conversations and discussions that happen in Discord. Like, Nintendo was real serious about that. Figure out any way they can, how you unlocking these keys that are encrypted, that kind of stuff. But with Super Nintendo, it's like, what are we gonna do? Like, it's Super Nintendo, it's open source, it's out there, and that's it. It's legacy. In this case, yeah, Nintendo's gonna leverage that with PC, because I guess you could hook up a Super Nintendo for it, for a Super Nintendo, and like do all kinds of conversions for it to get it to HDMI for a flat screen. You could use the Switch. You could use a Wii U. I'm sure Nintendo has all these things laying around, but in their mind, let's hook up a PC because it's convenient. Wow, go figure. Emulators that work really well to preserve games that allow you access to titles that are not sold anymore unless you want to spend a ton of money on eBay. Yeah, they work really well. The thing that's kind of interesting about this, though, is that Nintendo does indeed have an emulator that would run fine on a Windows PC, as they seem to be showing it off here with I guess just not everyone necessarily knowing up until this point. But yeah, at the museum, they just using Windows PCs, they're running Super Mario on it, and most likely, I would assume, is an emulator they developed in-house that, yes, they just ported, and there it is, running on Windows. Although, they would have developed a lot of this stuff, I'm sure, on PC anyway, so here you go, here's the version we were playing around with in the R&D lab that we then moved over to the Switch. So sure, you could make the case that it's embarrassing for Nintendo, but I actually don't really think it's that shocking, because it's just a convenient way to have these retro games show up on a TV, and technically then they can change them out for different emulators, depending on what they want that kiosk to be, maybe that week or anything in the future. But yes, it is also Nintendo admitting that, wow, emulators, very convenient, especially on PC. Next up, let's talk about the new Xbox Series X. This is the all-digital white one, and Austin Evans did a video showing it off as well as tearing it down. And some of the images you can see here were posted over on The Verge. These are from Austin Evans' video, which I also have linked down below if you're curious about the Xbox Series X all-digital white model. But in this teardown, he discovered multiple things that are kind of interesting, specifically things you would expect from like a mid-generation upgrade that we would get from slim models, for example, okay? And in this case, for the Xbox Series X 2020 versus the 2024 Xbox Series X, so 4 years later, the back bracket was missing. These are all things I'm sure that are cost-saving measures. The vapor chamber, the main heatsink, also changed a bit. You can see copper pipes running over the top, the big copper base being removed for this. And it also looks like the main chip was moved to 6 nanometer, whereas before with the regular Xbox Series X that we've had for about 4 years now, was at a 7 nanometer process. And in fact, it does show this in the power draw that it has, which seems to have dropped about 16 watts at full game. Like, so when you're actually playing a game, it dropped a decent amount, nothing crazy, but just over the course of time and the amount less heat that it would be technically producing there, I mean, it does add up. Now, keep in mind, well, you have the white discless Xbox Series X at $450. There's also a 2 terabyte special edition Xbox Series X that's at $600. So even Microsoft kind of playing around with that more expensive price point for systems, much like we see with Sony with their PlayStation 5 Pro. So the roof for these systems in terms of pricing continues to go up, and I do think it's setting up probably a more expensive next generation launch with the PlayStation 7 and whatever Microsoft has planned here in the next couple of years. But it does at least look like the Xbox Series X did see a revision internally that was a bit more than just removing the disk drive, which they also removed the plug, so technically you can't outfit a new disk drive in there and make it a disk-based Xbox Series X. Kind of like that Xbox One S, One SAD, the S all digital. Well, they actually left the contact points in there, so it still made the eject noise. I wonder if the Xbox Series X diskless version will do that too. Next up, let's talk about Bandai Namco. As it appears, they are downsizing somewhat, but they don't actually want to say they're downsizing. They apparently have a strategy involved here. Now, the first thing here is, according to Bloomberg, multiple contracts and projects were canceled. One also seems to be linked to Nintendo, which we know Nintendo and Bandai, they do work on actually multiple projects, a ton of different games, and we've seen it more and more with the Switch. But it's really hard to say what that project was. It didn't seem to be any indication from Bloomberg. However, it also appears that Bandai Namco is downsizing with their staff. We can see this posted up. This is through gamesindustry.biz, citing Bloomberg here, where they say Bandai Namco is reportedly cutting its workforce. According to Bloomberg sources, the Tokyo-based company is taking a traditionally Japanese approach to reducing staff and sending workers to rooms where they are given nothing to do, putting pressure on them to leave voluntarily, said the people, asking not to be named, discussing private information. It's alleged 200 of its 1,300 employees have been moved into these expulsion rooms, or Odayashi Beya, and almost half of these have since voluntarily resigned. Now, at this point, Bandai is refuting these reports, saying it's not true, although I'm sure there's nuance in there as to them sending them to a room where they're like, oh, no, we have stuff for them to do. It's not like important stuff. They're sharpening pencils. Or the idea here is, in Japan, these different companies, to my understanding, is the last resort is to lay people off. Like, you have to actually prove to the government or whoever that you have no other option. You have to just downsize your workforce or you're just gone anyway, and then everyone loses their job. In this case, probably seems like something Bandai doesn't have to necessarily go through because they could probably find things for them to do, but if they are losing or cutting out contracts or projects, they of course want to cut down on the workforce, since they don't necessarily need to be bloated when they don't have that many contracts to technically work on or just game projects. So send people to a room and they have to just sit there, and you just basically hope that eventually they get so bored they're ready to leave. I guess you could wait it out and hope for some other project, something to pop up. Or you could just sit there and stare at a wall and still get paid technically, but it would, I guess, just wear on you over time, and it would feel like you're just wasting your entire day sitting in a room that may or may not have windows. But again, Bandai is refuting this for now. However, Bloomberg seems pretty confident in their reporting, so we'll see if we get anything else around Bandai Namco, especially when it comes to this contract with Nintendo and maybe what game was canceled. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Super Mario Party Jamboree, which is out tomorrow, and it continues this trend of Nintendo releasing games on a Thursday. But we did have reviews coming in, and we can see this over on Metacritic, currently sitting at an 82, which I'm sure people are like, oh, that feels kind of low for a first-party Nintendo game. But in this case, that actually makes it the highest rated Mario Party game overall. People tend to forget that Mario Party isn't exactly like a highly rated franchise. It tends to sit, believe it or not, in like the 70s or the 60s, sometimes the 50s, but in this instance, people seem pretty happy with it. So, for example, Nintendo Life gave it a 90, says Super Mario Party Jamboree is a fantastic new entry in the franchise that focuses on improving the core mechanics and experience, making for a more involving board game in the process, whilst also polishing everything to a slick sheen. On the other end, though, we do have Eurogamer, which made their own headlines with a 40 or a 4 out of 10, saying it's the biggest Mario Party game yet, but fails to find the fun at almost every step. So maybe they just lost every time, or they didn't get any stars. I mean, it seemed like for the most part, people were like, oh yeah, it's Mario Party, but now it has 20-player online. That's kind of cool. Or it's just a more polished Mario Party, or there's fun ideas here. To me, if you're already invested in the Mario Party franchise, like you just really enjoy the games, you're probably going to pick this one up anyway, and it's probably going to seem like the best Mario Party game ever. For me, I enjoyed Mario Party back in the day. I would say Super Mario Party on the Switch was also really fun because they found unique ways, once again, to use Nintendo's hardware. But for me, like the glory days of Mario Party would have been late Nintendo 64, like GameCube era, right in there. I think things were awesome then with it. Mario Party 2, in my mind, is still one of the best entries outright. And then also on the GameCube, I played a lot of Mario Party 4, actually. However, it's still Mario Party. It's still a blast to play with friends, unless you're a gamer and apparently you just get 0 stars and come in last place every time. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you played any of the Dino Crisis games? Here's what I was thinking. 69%, good job, says no. 31% say yes. And what I mean by this is, seems like a good opportunity to introduce people to this franchise for the first time. And look, if the emulation is good and the game itself still plays fine, that's great. People can still experience it. But there is that, I'm sure that thing just in the back of your mind is like, wow, they really didn't add trophies to this. I can't buy this separately. That seems really strange. And it stands out kind of in a bad way, almost like it's lower quality compared to the other classic releases that are just built out with trophies and you can just buy them. So it just feels like low effort, and it's kind of a shame for Dino Crisis because that is a franchise, especially now with some of the newer systems and technology that we have, and RE Engine could do some really, really cool stuff now, but at least it's technically there for people to experience, and we'll see how that goes. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Jono, says, that would be so dumb if GameCube games on NSO are streaming only. So I don't think they would be streaming only because we've seen the Switch already emulate GameCube games in the homebrew scene. It's been tested. It seems to work well enough. And we also have other games that Nintendo has recompiled or done different things with so that it works. Like like Mario Sunshine, for example. And on the other side with the Wii, we have Mario Galaxy. So it's all possible. My thing though with the streaming aspect is Nintendo wants these things to open and open immediately, quickly, right? When it comes to delivering these games for the first time. So I think the idea here, and this is a good way to test it, is games file sizes are going to get bigger for Nintendo, no matter what, right? Like it's hard to keep these games down to 5 gigabytes, 6 gigabytes. So even Tears of the Kingdom got up there. It was like 13 or 14 gigabytes or something, right? It was much larger than the day one patch. So in Nintendo's mind, what if we can play around with streaming technology so you experience the game immediately, it downloads in the background, and then the handoff happens seamlessly. So we don't have to worry about someone downloading something for what feels like a while with Nintendo, even with basic file sizes of 5 or 6 gigabytes. It takes longer than it should, I feel like. So maybe Nintendo is just playing around with different ways to deliver games, and they're like, hey, we have these first-party GameCube games that we were going to release anyway on NSO. Let's just go ahead and let people stream it with this playtest and see how that works out. So that's kind of my thought process. I wouldn't expect it to just be streaming and that's it. I think there's going to be a bit of choice streaming, download, or a mixture of both. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card, or maybe you want to listen to the latest Click R3 podcast that went live today, where we talked about all kinds of stuff PlayStation, as well as that Dragon Ball Sparking Zero release. I'll leave that right below it. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.